Burada bir pointer var değil mi?
Aha.
Ha.
Şu şekilde.
Nasıl
Şuraya basın.
nasıl çalışıyor bu?
Şuraya kırmızıya. Bu ileri, bu geri.
Tamam.
Pointer.
Tamam. Okey. Çalışıyor. Okay. Merhabalar. Hepinize hoş geldiniz. Ve en çok İDE'ye teşekkür etmeniz lazım. Hepinizi bir araya getirdikleri için. Bu bu session konusu İstanbul ve kimliği. Türkçe yapmayacağım. Kusura bakmayın çünkü aramızda İngilizce konuşanlar var. Onun için İngilizce yapacağım. Nick Burchill zaten İngilizce konuştuğu için konuşmanın da akışı daha rahat olması gerektiği için. Çalışıyor. So, it's going to be in English. Don't worry, Nick. I just wanted to make a quick Turkish introduction. So, the issue that we're dealing with in this session is the idea of identity and the idea of sense of place. Where are we in this context in Turkey and of course Istanbul, this grand city? And as an introduction, just to get things going, I have a few slides here just to provoke the conversation. For thousands of years, mankind lived at a balance with its nature and managed to come a long way until the Industrial Revolution. But this is the point that we've come to right now. This is what we're dealing with, and with design, as architects, this is currently the best that we can manage. But is this our ideal? Is this what we should be doing? There's a very well-known definition of sustainability. It's in Turkish. Everything here is in Turkish, so excuse me for that. Which we all know about. Sustainability is all about designing for the future. It's all about designing for the generations to come. But are we doing that currently in Istanbul? As architects, we are in a very, very important position. We're in a prime driver position here. It all comes through us. The client comes after he's decided that he's going to do something. He comes to the architect. So we're in an incredibly powerful position, almost godlike. We can change things. We have this chance. But what are we doing with this chance? Now, this 3,000-year-old intelligence seems to have just disappeared. It's just gone. It doesn't exist any longer. Certainly not amongst us, anyway. There are perhaps some good examples of it in other countries. I've lived in London for many, many years. It's a city I love. I love Istanbul as well. But I'm hungry in Istanbul for green space. I'm hungry in Istanbul for order, for some sense of place, for some sense that somebody is thinking about me as an Istanbulian. Who is an Istanbulian anymore? Who are Istanbulians? Do they feel Istanbulian anymore? And look at London. If you can see that, the lights are a bit too bright here actually. Can you turn the lights down? Please, quickly. Can you turn the lights down? Işıkları aşağı indirebilir misiniz azıcık? Slide'lar görülmüyor çünkü. I mean, look at the plan of London and look at the fantastic network of streets, squares, parks, designed parks, a park that has actually been thought about centuries ago. And you know goddamn well that park will be there 5 centuries later. But how sure are we that this little patch of green land that is in our wonderful city is going to be there 10 years from now? At the rate at which we're going, do you think this piece of green will still be here? As you know, we gave a good fight on Taksim Square, but do we know if we won that fight? Are we going to win it? And this is where Istanbul is at the moment in the world. In terms of the quality of life index, this is the level that we're at. And this, the most sad fact, the relationship of green space to built space, we're way down in that list. Way down in that list. So we're living through a tragedy right now. And we as architects have a huge potential in our hands. Not just potential, but we have a responsibility. You know, it's in our hands to preach to our clients And if our clients tell us, build 10 times the amount that you can build, and that happens, as you know, we should refuse, shouldn't we, as architects? What do you think? Yay or nay? We should refuse. Should we take the money and run? Turn on the microphone, please. Can you turn on Gökhan's microphone? What do you think, Gökhan?
Hello.
Hello? Do you think we should take the money and run?
Where is the money?
That's another question.
They don't.
That's another question. We can talk about that till the cows come home. We can talk about that later. But I know what your answer is. Of course you'd like to say no. Wouldn't you like to say no? Wouldn't you love to say no? Wouldn't we all like to say no once to our clients? Are there any clients in this room? Can you put your hands up? Is there anyone here from Zorlu or from Varyap? Who are you? Where are you from? I can't hear you. Bemex. Okay. Are there any other clients here? Any other contractors, builders? Where are you from?
I'm a contractor plus an architect.
But which company? Sixi. Sisi. Okay. Great. And there's another one there? Polat. Okay. So at least I'm not talking to myself. Please, when this session is finished, please think about what we've been saying, and please talk to others in your class, in your level. So, I mean, I put that slide up here. This was Gezi. And the question is, are Istanbulians still feeling like this city is theirs? Is there such a thing as an Istanbulian anymore? Is this Istanbul? Well, this is Istanbul, This is how Istanbul is growing. A tragedy is unfolding in front of our eyes. And here, this is what inspires us. This is our inspiration. This is where we go for our inspiration. We say, we want to do that. This is what we want to do. And we're doing it as fast as we can. Once the pedestrian felt like he owned the streets. Now the cars own the streets. It's cars that design this city. Is there any sense of public realm in this picture? We all go there. We all try to cross the street. We all try to go from one building to the other. Do we have any idea that there is someone out there who thought about the human being in designing this part of the city? Or any part of this city? And is this where we're heading? Is this Istanbul? This is what we want? This is all in our memories right now. I look at this scene from my window every day. Fortunate that I am. I look at this scene. But unfortunately, I see this. And I cry every morning. And slowly, I feel as if we're sinking. I don't feel good about things. I don't feel, as an architect, that we're heading in the right direction. I love Istanbul. I love my country. But I seriously, sincerely think that we are heading in the wrong direction. To make this right, this is the way we have to think. Sustainability is a key word. We have to think like this. But we cannot do it superficially. We have to do it really. We really have to do this. And the factors that govern our actions, I always put ethics on the top. I think that the most important thing is how we behave ethically towards society, towards culture, towards people. Economics, investing for the future, ecology, dealing with nature. So, as architects, I feel like we have a huge responsibility. We are in a key position to act. And actually not to act sometimes. Non-action is an action. Non-action is an action. Do you agree with that? Can you turn the microphone on?
Is that on? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's the architect has enormous ability to be able to influence, but we have to face the reality that probably you can't do it on your own. You know, these are such difficult problems. We have to actually keep the problems on the table and to make sure that people are continually thinking about it, and that those remain in the kind of public realm, in the public eye. And that comes through the things that we write and the things that we draw and design. But you know, if you look at you know, London has come about because of historically a number of key architects who have designed those spaces and the wonderful crescents in Regent Street and things, but also the fact that there's been a collaboration between the architects and the people in authority. And I think what's also needed alongside the architects are some real champions in the authorities here to actually start to solve some of these problems. Yeah. And when you see the way some of the really difficult issues are tackled in any city, quite often those things are they come about occasionally because actually you've got a mayor who's particularly dynamic. If you take the last two mayors in New York, they've had a really important influence in the whole quality of life in that city.
But we have a very dynamic mayor here as well. I mean, Kadir Topbaş has been incredibly dynamic and, to be honest, very impressive in things that he has achieved. But has he ever had an architect advising him? You know that Kadir Topbaş is an architect?
No, that's what I mean. I think they need you look at other cities and people invite a group of renowned experts to come and help with the problem. They don't deal with it as a bureaucratic problem.
Yeah.
They deal with it as an issue, a responsibility in terms of the quality of life in a city, and also the way that then helps generate the business and other aspects of the city. Quite often the end driver is that the city remains successful as a business community as well as a social community. But there is the recognition when you bring a number of key minds together that you can actually identify the way forward and try and drive through the politics and set agendas which can be realized in the long term. I think one of the other issues is that the pressures of time and ambitions here naturally generate occasionally short-term thinking. And what it also needs is the medium and long-term
Occasionally
thinking.
or always?
I've
never seen an instance in which it's never been short-term
Yeah,
thinking.
no, you're probably right. I think
Can you give me an example when it's not short-term thinking here?
No, I think well, I think probably if you took, I mean, for me, the greatest piece of recent infrastructure I've seen in any city, and I know it's a limited amount, but is your Metrobus here. Now that's a long-term thinking in terms of actually taking people off the road. And you say about the dominance of cars and things here, but actually the problem you have here is you do not have public transport. The reason why car journeys in London are so much lower is that people only have to walk 20 minutes to a tube station or a bus network. So that's the long-term thing has got to say, right, let's put it, there should be an ambition in this city to have a much more comprehensive public transport system.
So there is goodwill. There is a sense of goodwill. The municipality is trying to do its best, but it's not solving the problem, is it? I mean, as it unfolds in front of us, it's a tragedy unfolding. Now, how do we stop this, Gökhan? What do you think we should do?
I think the important thing is not our responsibility about it's not as an architect we design many things, but this important thing to how can we take attention the Istanbulian on this issue, because the problem is we design many buildings, but there is no connection to each other. That's the big problem. And then how can we live together the ground floor, and how can we take from each other any ideas, any context? Because in Istanbul, and one of the oldest city in the world, approximately we know that 8,500 years old. There are many examples about the city life. I remember the many modernist contemporary architects visited Istanbul end of the 19th century and the 20th century, and then they always mentioned the idea was many villages making the big city. There was there were very many the green areas in between the villages.
But London is like that too. You know, London is a collection of villages.
Yeah.
And when I walk through the streets of London, I can still feel like I'm walking through a series of villages. In Istanbul, it's sometimes true. Like if I go to Kuzguncuk, I feel like I'm back in the village.
Yeah,
And
Arnavutköy,
Nişantaşı still tries to protect itself.
Ortaköy.
There are
And
places
many-
like that. But we're not creating new villages, are we? Like the images I showed you of Kayabaşı, these are our new villages.
I think one of
How do we deal with that? You know, what do we do about that?
I think the important thing to how can we live in the city? And this city, the ruined by car industry, and then of course we need the car, but the city connected, especially the pedestrian, and then public transportation, and then private transportation. The important thing to first of all, we should agree about the grid. How can we understand the ground floor, all city? Doesn't matter the slope,
surface
hill,
that we walk on.
and then the flat. This important thing to how can we understand the ground floor relationship.
Yesterday you said something which I really liked when we were talking about this subject. You said in Turkish, herkes çekiliyor.
Setback.
In Turkey there's a law, the setback law. By the way, can I have a hands up? Who is not Turkish here? Okay, so just a quick explanation. The building laws in Turkey are very simple. The urban planning is only about where the cars
The Turkish
go.
name is Terk.
Yeah, but the only thing is about where the cars go, that's what's dominating, and then the setback. So you have your plot, and then the municipality tells you setback 5 meters, 10 meters, 20 meters, do your thing there. And Gökhan referred to this
Leave the
yesterday.
green, but there is no green.
Yes, yes, he said, you know, leave a little bit of green and so on, but actually no one uses that as an opportunity for green. So everyone is kind of setting back and squeezing into their own plots and doing their own thing. And I really like the way you referred to that. Herkes çekiliyor
Yeah.
in Turkish. And çekilmek in Turkish also means kind of giving up. You know, like, that's it, I can't do anything about this. Don't you think that's it?
Yeah, I think, for example, the Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Qatar, follow that idea. There are many fantastic buildings, but there is no community, there is no connection. You can't walk in between the buildings. Among their buildings, you know.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, and then today the Istanbul. It's not Istanbul's original the lifestyle. Lifestyle is in the many street and then
Mahalle.
shopping, and you know you can go to buy the bread, but you can buy the shoes. You know, it's the good trade combination. And
But you see, I live this in modern cities today. I mean, I go to Paris. We were there like a few weeks ago with our students, and I cried when I got to the streets of Paris. You know, I thought, Jesus, what we're missing. You know, there's a great sense of place. There's a great sense of streetscape, and human beings can live in relatively small enclaves without having to get into their cars to do what they have to do. They can live and survive. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think one of the things you have to recognize here, you know, when you work in places like London, Moscow, and here, there's absolutely no doubt this is one of the most complex places to actually design and implement real estate and living environments. And I say complex because, you know, like if you're in London, you have a local authority that publishes, after a lot of public consultation, a unitary development plan. And that is not just about building quantums, it's about the character and environment and qualities that they want to implement over a period of time in their regions. And in that way, that's the way that open spaces and the public streets and the living environments become protected, but also developed and taken forward. And you're absolutely right about the zoning plans here. It is a real straitjacket. It's something that, if there's one thing that needs to be challenged, and adapted and taken forward, is the zoning strategy here. Because if you look at all the recent review of the municipality regulations, which has created a lot of uncertainty for all the development world over this last year, it's all about numbers.
Yes, totally about numbers.
You know, it's about FAR, it's about building heights, it's
not
about a
about place.
footprint percentage. And I think one of the things, what you said is absolutely right. The only way you can achieve what you've described, Gökhan, is actually to challenge the footprint and setback arrangements. Because the regulations here prevent you from creating urban architecture and urban design. And the generation of streets, you see it in the buildings. Yes, every plot is taken on its own. So if you take that zoning structure, plus also the incredibly complex ownership structure you have here, they're the two key issues to be addressed. And I think it's important that, as was said in the opening speech today, that people start to look at a district and say, right, how can we actually solve the problem? It's not rebuilding, it's actually new urban design thinking that should go into these districts. And I feel that there's a lot of development here that's actually just building. It's building quantum of buildings, it's not creating places.
The key word that's coming from here is about ownership. It's about relatively smaller cells within the overall cell, which is Istanbul, now pushing 15 million. But there's those smaller cells owning up to their identity and actually saying, this is our identity and this is what we would like to do in the future. And the issue is whether that voice exists, for those smaller places to retain their identity. Now, you have a few talking points that we discussed yesterday, and you want to actually go through those slides. I know you want to talk about style, for example, as an issue. What do you have to say about style? What should be the style that we
I've kind of structured this a little bit so that we all kind of input into it, to keep the kind of discussion going. I started off, in terms of this theme of internationalism. If you look at an image of London, and then you look at an image of Moscow, and then you look at an image of Istanbul, what's the difference? As you see the images
but
on
at night they all look the same.
No, but also in the daytime they're not wholly different. That international style is something that unifies things in a way. I think we need to be careful about what you call internationalism. And I think what's terrific here is an appetite. There's absolutely no doubt that Turkey has an international outlook and is seeking input and advice and knowledge from the outside world coming in. So there is that. The key thing is moving away from a stylish thing. It's actually an attitudinal thing. There is the appetite to do that. I think the problem is that in this environment, things like costs is a major driver, and that's part again of the issue of short-term thinking. And if you look at the number of developments, especially new developments, if you take office buildings where it is a completely different investment structure. People are selling off floor plates and office buildings. It's multi-owner office buildings.
So you're
compared
saying that
to people who build a building, own it and operate it for a period of time.
So you're saying that cost is too much of a driver, and it's because of cost that we are actually losing the thread here. Is that what you're trying to say?
I think
that
so.
We're too cost-conscious in
well,
Turkey?
yeah, well, I think there's an ambition to draw in lots of international thinking, but as soon as you start to look at what that costs, maybe in the cost of getting the right consultant team together, the cost of M&E systems.
That's what you're really talking about.
If you look at the cost of the building, you're under tremendous pressure here. If you look at the land costs, equation
what-
to
how much does it-
rentals and construction costs, it's a really, really tough equation for people
How much
working
does it
there.
cost to think about public realm? What's the cost of thinking about public realm? What's the cost in thinking about the street, in thinking about the human relationship to the building, in thinking about this, the space that is like a living room in the city? How much does that cost?
Yeah. I mean,
Absolutely
I've always been
absolutely
slightly
nothing.
surprised
It's
that
not, doesn't cost anything.
you look at the massive value that's embedded in Levent, and you have this shelf that's just got all of these buildings on the shelf. The public realm, I totally agree with you, is for a central business district is just appalling. And you know, other cities deal with that by having Section 1 agreements, and you can call it a kind of taxation. A developer is putting together a development, they make a contribution to some of the public realm improvements around the buildings. And that way, authorities have an element of funding that allows them to implement that. Here, you see, it is shocking in a city that's trying to promote itself on the world stage, the quality of the spaces between buildings and the lack of realization that if you improve those spaces, they add value to the buildings, to the development, as well as the quality of life. It's just not recognized. And there's no funding mechanisms, the spaces just get left. And I think that needs to be addressed. I think it should be, if you look at the amount of value that's in Levent, there should have been a mechanism by which each of those developers and investors made a contribution to improving the quality of the public realm in your central business district.
Well, we were talking about this again with Gökhan, that the so-called master plan of Istanbul is nothing but colored maps with zones and beautifully drawn streets that are for cars only. That's all the master plan tells you. There's nothing else about public realm, anything about relationships between how buildings should be, etc. And what do you think the solution to that is, Gökhan? How does, I mean, if we were to talk, if the municipality was here, is there anyone here from municipality? Is there anyone here from belediyeden birisi var mı burada? Bir ihtimal? Yok. There's no one here from
We can talk.
We're talking to ourselves right now. So what do you think the solution is? If we were talking to the municipality about the way to deal with what Nick is describing?
I think the important thing today, the design issue, contextualizing concept or conceptualizing context means some city has the big potential in their history. They have a heritage like Istanbul, and then you can find easily some solutions in history. And today, the Istanbul wanna be in a different city, not real Istanbul. That's our problem, especially the municipality designing and preparing the new master planning, but there is no connection in the history and today's life. An important thing to let's say the internationalism, the globalism, especially the Eurocentric design idea. But every year they're upgrading and changing some issues, especially they already maybe 20 years ago totally left the designing any master plan for car, and then they started thinking about the pedestrian life, city life for human. And the Istanbul is following right now maybe the old school ideas for master planning. We should change that, I think, to the mentality. And then thinking about design, I think this is a fantastic issue. The contextualizing concept, and conceptualizing context, and sometimes vice versa.
Well, I like the sound of that. I'm not sure if I understand that. What do you understand from it?
Well, I think I just think there needs to be some visions put in place.
Right. some real thinking.
Some real thinking, some serious thinking.
Yeah.
If you, again, I come back to what I said earlier, that in London, you know, a lot of, again, it's a city under enormous pressure of population growth. It's continually dynamic. And yet, if you look behind the scenes, you know, if you go to, in the mayor's office, they will have a group of people, that is, someone from the mayor's office, someone from the city authorities, someone from some of the leading thinkers in terms of master planning and urban design, and they debate and define those concepts. And those concepts are not just theoretical. I think you're absolutely right. You have to look at the context and define what is correct, what's appropriate, and what's realistic. And I think at the moment it all feels a little bit disjointed here. You know, everybody has the Chamber of Architects has a view, the Greater Municipality have a view, you now have the influence of ministry. And it's kind of, it feels like it needs to be pulled together as a group of really experienced thinkers to try and unlock some of these problems.
Gökhan yesterday used the word consensus. That's the issue here, that we don't have any consensus about what should be done. I mean, my belief is that architects are in a key position to actually initiate that sense of consensus. Now, we have another 10 minutes to talk, and as you can see, they're opening up the shop at the back. So what I'd like to do is draw some commentary from the audience here, because it's a very important subject. Can we have some microphones, please? So what does the audience think about this? Can you tell us how you think consensus should be? Bring the microphone here, please. Achieved? Can you introduce yourself, please, before you talk?
It's Hakan Özkaşıkçı. As many of you were here yesterday, as I can notice, we had a lovely debate. I'm the design manager for Southeastern Europe for Intercontinental Hotels Group. And actually, I would like to congratulate Gökhan Avcıoğlu for being spot on, hitting the bullseye, conceptualizing context with context in concept. But let's face the fact here. We are suffering from a severe influx that has been prompted and provoked. Well, the reverse practice was carried in Greater China. They built cities first up front, and they tried to provoke people to go and, you know, inhabit there, which failed very badly. There are a lot of ghost cities in China at the moment. Whereas in London, as per your sample, there was a protective ring around the historic center that made certain that such an influx would be controlled on an economical basis as well. So, what has happened at the moment. Now, Istanbul has been introduced with that tremendous value that's on the shelf, and everybody is coming into Istanbul because the makers of, the masters of make-believe have succeeded to draw those people for prosperity. There's a promise over there, and everybody is going to come on, so we cannot stop that. Well, let's look forward. How do you treat this patient from here on, as in terms of the people are going to come in, and the center of Istanbul is in jeopardy in terms of, vanishing in a very near future. There is no infrastructure that's sufficient enough to carry that load. What is to be done? I wonder that, actually.
Ideas about that here? Does anyone have any idea of how that could be done? Anyone from the audience? Gentleman over there, just behind. Just behind. And then the lady after that, just after him.
When I was outside, I asked the Yalın Yaltraklı, Intercontinental Hotels Group Development Director. I asked that question of the master plan of Istanbul, the metropolitan plan, to the manager of urban transformation when I was outside, and I asked him, we as the developers, how can we guide our investors on a certain plot, on a certain location, to invest? Which location is the correct location? Because I'm an urban planner myself, and we usually believe in the hierarchy of planning, and there needs to be a metropolitan plan, and then that has to be filtered down all the way down to the urban design and then architecture. But right now, Istanbul had a metropolitan plan that has been done about 3-4 years ago. That was finalized. But then with the third airport and the third bridge, the, the, the, the, the factors of that metropolitan plan changed dramatically. And right now, we're having a hard time. So the Atatürk Airport is going to be carried out, and what's going to be happening in its current location, what kind of a function is going to be there, the third airport, and what are the areas around it, how are they going to be identified. Yeah, and then there's Kanal Istanbul as well. So I asked that question, and the answer I got was actually we need to be able to looking at the investors. We need to be able to looking at the local urban transformation plans, and then we can actually have an idea currently, because right now the Istanbul doesn't have a metropolitan plan, and it's going by really palliative or fractional approach.
For the gentleman said exactly the same thing. You're not proposing any solution other than we need a plan. How do we do that plan? The lady at the back, would you have any ideas about that?
I was going to touch to the same point because like 10 years ago, excuse me?
Same thing. I want to know what to do. What do we do?
First we have to, analyze the problem. Then we can talk about what to do. The problem is we had once, like 10 years ago, it started, a master plan. Was it good or not? I don't know quite well, but at least there was a plan. But whenever about a couple of hundred experts got together and prepared a plan for Istanbul. And whenever the person at the head of that group was asked to make some changes at the plan that he doesn't believe, and he resigned and went away. And after then, so many changes has made at that plan. And beside then, well, to change the plan is something, let's say, forgivable. But without talking about the plan, some big projects, government projects, took places in Istanbul, like Third Bridge, airport. It's a new ministry having all kind of constructional decisions in his body, environmental municipality, because they have their own laws by any land within the city or without at the city. So now also that the channel project, Istanbul Channel project, if it takes place, which is told that it will, and 4 new cities are planning just around that. And the problem is any kind of plan cannot hold all of these. So we have to see what's going to happen. 1,500,000 people will be settled at those 4 new cities. It is announced by their architects or people, some of them are Turkish and mostly foreign, that 1.5 million people will be the inhabitants of that area. It's very close to Istanbul. So Istanbul is going to integrate with those. It's not going to be a new city. Any kind of road, any kind of railroad cannot carry out this. So, Istanbul needs a master plan, also knowing all these new problems and start maybe quickly solve this problem. But the architect, if it's a good architect, considered, who can create more constructible area in the same land.
Architects or architects? Can I just give the word to
I think there is an opportunity here. It's a massive problem. It's quite intangible. That's one of the difficulties. But I think one of the opportunities, perhaps, in the current pressure and need to solve some of the seismic issues here, as we saw this morning, there were, some of the thinking is starting to become district scale. You're taking an area in the build, transfer, vacate. You're relocating people so you can rebuild that area. The key thing now is to take some of those, manage those areas which are of a, they're of a good urban size, and start to introduce urban design principles into the redesign of those areas, rather than just real estate and quantums of accommodation. And you've got an opportunity there if people want to tackle it. You can't, the issue is too big to tackle it as a city as a whole. Yes, you've got to have a citywide view of public transport and road transport, but you do have, I think, an incredible opportunity in this rebuilding program where you don't just rebuild, you actually start to create some of the communities. You described London as being a series of communities that have joined together. I think that's actually the opportunity that needs to be grabbed.
I agree with that entirely. I think you do as well. But we felt yesterday that although that's a great opportunity, there needs to be something that ties this huge matrix together. I mean, the matrix you talked about, airport, Canal Istanbul, God knows what else. I mean, the resettlement of 1.5 million people, Jesus. Someone needs to think about this at a grand scale. Someone needs to have a grand idea about it. Now, perhaps that's not the job of one person. Perhaps it's the job of a group of people. But at the end of the day, it's the job of architects and urban planners and town planners. And they need to get together and actually say to the municipality, guys, we're heading into a wall. This is going to implode on itself. This is not going to a good place. Don't you agree? How do we do this? What do we do to gather our intelligence, our forces together to somehow stop this juggernaut before it crashes?
Sometimes we realize interesting the design issues in Istanbul. For example, I think the only Istanbul has skyscrapers with a garden wall. There are many skyscrapers in Istanbul, let's say the high side of the building, has a garden wall. How can we combine the skyscrapers and garden walls? What's kind of the life there? Because, if you have the air rights to go up, you should leave the ground floor, the pedestrian and the people, because the community needs and the shops before to go to up, and then the meet some people, and then and also the subway, metro connections, and the ground floor. If you design in a high-rise building, you should leave the community to that area. That's the idea.
Well, I think we've heard that.
And then,
we've
for
heard
example,
that. But what do we actually do at the macro scale? I can hear you about the mahalle, about the community, the street, the blah blah blah. Okay, but I'm looking at 15 million people. We're now stretching up towards the Black Sea. With no real plan. How do we get to a plan that is actually plausible?
I think the problem is expecting a plan. Somebody will design it suddenly. We'll find the early morning, on our table. I think that we should think about it without the municipality and then the other communities and then government. I think that we should talk about the public realm and public space, and then with developers especially, because giving taker relationship bring any properties, I think, the value.
So small by small is what you're saying.
Step by step.
What Gökhan is trying to say is every developer that I work with, I'm going to preach community, green space, relationship, human scale, etc. And I'm going to do my bit for that part that I have influence over. What are you going to do, Nick? What's your...
I think it's very much about if you're moving beyond, well, even with the individual building, I think It's the issue of promoting the philosophy of terrific architecture and urban design. They're inextricably linked in terms of actually creating great cities. There's no point in saying we'll have some great buildings if they're not joined up correctly. I totally agree. I just think there are a number of developments coming through in Istanbul now, which are of a scale that allows you to demonstrate that creating communities can be achieved in this tough location. And it's challenging some of the zoning issues. I think it is about, the zoning pushes against giving public uses at the ground floor because it's zoned as an office building. But actually, if you have some of these districts that are going to be redeveloped, I just think it's a fantastic opportunity to really start to introduce genuine mixed-use development in communities and move away from, and Toki themselves realise that some of the residential developments that have been happening in the mass housing recently are, as they say, they're places where people sleep, but they don't live there. And I think they recognise that actually that has to change. So I think they're listening. I think we need some exemplar developments, and we need to have the right developers and investors who understand that to realise those and demonstrate what can be achieved. They
So
then become the
again you're
blueprint for the
saying
bigger picture.
Go bit by bit. Do what you can when you can.
I think otherwise you will end up, the danger if you go too big a
what
scale.
you're saying is that we take no action on the grand scale.
No, you have to do both.
We don't have any influence on this matter. We cannot talk to the
No,
municipality.
you have to do both.
Yeah, we don't need them. Especially, I would like an example.
Microphone.
And Ömer Rizvan is here. We designed a new hotel with him. He's our consultant. And he brought the new idea for lobby. And then I think one of the biggest lobby in the world we designed because of him. And then he brought in Eskişehir there. He said there are many young people. We should invite them, and we need a welcoming, invitable, and a new green lobby. And then actually we don't know yet. We can do many things in the exhibitions and then some events. But we have right now the fantastic lobby. And then, thanks to Ömer, and then
But what's this about a lobby? I mean, why are we talking about a lobby here?
He convinced, and it's important thing, what I'm telling, the convincement is important thing. That he convinced
The investor.
And investors.
The investor, yeah.
Because maybe in the program we need maybe the 200 square meters the lobby. But right now the lobby, I think one of the important
so what you're
public
saying,
space.
What you're saying is someone like Ömer, who is also like an architect in a position of influence, can drive the developer, drive the investor towards the right thinking. I want to close this discussion last 3 minutes. Last 3 minutes from the audience. Does anyone have anything burning and urgent to say? Ömer, what do you have to say about this? What do you think we should do?
I think multiple layers. I mean, people of influence, I don't mean that influential people, I mean people of influence like architects, like consultants, and also executives who are actually taking salaries from developers and builders. They all have a collective responsibility to actually address this, because we cannot keep on saying we need a master plan or we need a grand scheme, or I think the time it takes to produce such leadership at a grand scale at best could take 2-3 decades, which is way too late. You lose the city. Or it could take a century to get a leadership of that sort. So therefore it is the collective of individuals' responsibilities wherever they are, whether they're getting a salary from a developer, whether they're getting a salary from a municipality, or they're basically employed, self-employed architects, consultants, or whatever. We all have to carry that responsibility. You talked about something about refusing certain schemes that a client wants. Do we have the balls? Can we? actually walk away or take the money and run.
Have you ever walked away?
Yes,
Good.
in a
Well
big
done.
scheme,
In what?
in a very big scheme of tourism allocation. The government actually gave the right to a client, to a prospective client, to build 2,000 beds in one of the most wonderful pieces of land that I've ever seen, in Mandalya Bay, in Gökova Bay. So we went there and we said, they said they wanted to work with us, and I looked at them and said, what a wonderful land, we would love to work with you, we would love to create a gem of a hotel here. They said, yes, and here's the papers, we just got the tahsis, and here's our permit, etc. I looked at it, I said, whoa, 2,000 beds. And he says, don't worry, Omar Bey, we have good relationships, we can increase it to 3,000. I said, look, I said, if you're going to build anything more than 150 rooms here, or 250 beds, we won't be a part of this.
Yeah.
And
Well
we walked
done.
away.
Well
There was a
done.
license. The government
Yeah.
actually stipulated it.
Yeah, well done for doing that. And I hope that there are more of you, and I hope that the message that comes from this conversation has gone through to the ears that are here. Let's do our part whenever we can. Let's not just go with that flow. That what I call sadly that Turkishness. Yani burası Türkiye deyip geçmeyelim. Lütfen bunu yapmayalım artık. El ele verelim. Hepimiz kendimiz, kendi alanımızda, with our own individual ability, our own individual power. Let's use that and let's try to change things bit by bit. Thank you very much.